Hey everyone, welcome back. In our last set of videos, I took you through the introduction to Nomad Sculpt, and then we sculpted a skull within the app. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how we can create this pillar within Nomad Sculpt. So I'm going to go right back to the beginning and show you exactly how I've achieved these results. And before I get started, as noted in the last tutorial, I'm left-handed, so I've got my toolbar set to the left-hand side. Now, if you want to switch that around, you can go into the settings, which should be in the top right-hand corner. So select the icon here and scroll all the way down. So go back up to the top just so you can see. Scroll down until it says flip middle, and that's ticked for me. So that's flipping everything to the other side. So that's just a little tip. If you're right-handed, it's probably set to this by default. If you're left-handed, then you can flip middle. And you can also flip all of the other bars as well if you want to. I've just kept it the way it is on my screen now. So flip middle, and then that's great for left-handed people. Right, so let's go and create a new folder, a new project. So select the folder and then select new, create a new scene, yes. And we're going to be met with our sphere, right? So let's change this to a cylinder. So here on the layer icon, I can go ahead and select cylinder, and that's created our cylinder, and the sphere is still there. We've just created the cylinder on top. So I want to create the basis for this pillar. Now let's go into our layers again and scroll up, and we can still see that that sphere is there. So if I click sphere, I can just go ahead and click this trash icon, and then that will delete it. And then the only thing that we have left here is our cylinder. I also need to go and change our camera view. So it's currently set to perspective. So I'm going to select orthographic, and that's going to remove the perspective from the scene. It's going to make it much easier to cut through this model and just see exactly how this is going to look without the perspective. So let's go back into our layers, and I'm just going to shrink this down. So there's this top circular green section here. If you just move this down, then we're going to make the thickness of our pillar, and then move up here, or our archway, shall I say. And let's move that up just so it's onto our grid. And if you wanted to make it any bigger, then you can hold this orange circle on the outside until it turns yellow, and then you can scale this in or out. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a Boolean function. So we're going to duplicate this cylinder, and then we're going to cut that cylinder from this one, and I'll show you that now. So we're going to go back into our scene, and we're going to select the duplicate section here. So it says cylinder, we've got the pencil, we've got the trash, and then we've got this duplicate button here. So that's now duplicated our cylinder. I'm going to select the arrow here and move this up. You'll also notice there's this little cube in the top right hand corner. If you want the front view, you can go ahead, select front, top, and the side views. Okay, so it just makes it nice and easier to see all these different views. Right, so let's go to the top view, and then let's select that outer orange circle, hold left click, and it's going to want to save. We've got the auto save function on, so why not? Let's call this arch. Let's put arch 02 and OK. So back to the top, hold the orange circle on the outside, and then we're going to get the width on the inside of this arch. So let's just move that down to round about there. That looks pretty good. And then we can go back up to the top. And because we need this section to cut through here, we need to make sure that it's actually longer than the cylinder that's underneath. So I'm going to select that green circle up the top. I'm going to stretch it out and then move this down until it intersects through the cylinder below it. Okay, that's looking good. So let's go ahead and hide this cylinder. So you'll notice that whatever is selected will be ticked. So I'm going to tick both of them so that they're both selected. And then the cylinder that is the smallest one on top, I need to hide. Okay, so there's an eye icon. If I select the eye icon, we can see that it's now hidden. If I then go to voxel merge here, then it will cut straight through that object. Okay, I'll just do that again. If I just double tap here and go back. I'm going to go into my scene. I'm going to make sure that both of them are ticked, so both cylinders. I can then select the eye icon on the smallest cylinder that's on top, and then select voxel merge. Okay, and that's going to create a boolean and cut straight through our cylinder. Awesome. So next step, we need to try and remove this cylinder shape now. So we're going to cut directly through the center, and I can do that by selecting the trim tool, and I'm going to select the rectangle. I'll make sure I'm in a top view, and then I'll just cut straight through the center here. So right from left hand corner, right hand corner, and then just cut through. I'm also just going to quickly change my background because it's a little bit too dark. Let's go back up to our lighting, and let's just change it to something where we can see our pillar. That looks pretty good. We'll keep it as that. So that was the trim tool. We can trim straight through, let go, and then that's going to trim it. So that's all good. Now let's go on to our mask. Let's have a look at the select mask. So here I'm going to select the rectangle, and I'm going to left click and drag just a little bit of this bottom section of the what once was a cylinder. Okay, so now that that is selected all the way through, I can select the select mask at the top here, and then in the settings I'm going to invert it. So I want what I selected to be inverted, so I can pull these sections down. So now I can scroll down to my gizmo, and I can just use the arrow key just to pull this down. If it makes it easy, we can go to something like a left or right view, and then just move this arrow across. Okay, that's looking good. Let's just move it out just a little bit more. There we go. And then when we're happy with that, we can go back onto the select mask, and we can go to the clear. Okay. Now I'll notice that there's a little bit of stretching going on at the bottom of this pillar. So I'm going to go onto the trim, and I'm just going to trim this bottom section. There we go. So if I go onto the wire, so the bottom left hand corner, or yours might be bottom right, depending on where you've put it, it says mask, voxel, and wire. So if I press wire, we can see the wireframe of our model. And you'll notice where we dragged that selection out, it's actually dragged the polygons with it. So we need to re-voxel this. So there's multiple ways we can do it. There's a shortcut right next to wire. We can go ahead and press voxel, and we'll see that it's re-voxelized it. Or we can go onto our topology section, and we can increase or decrease the resolution here, and then press remesh. So if I wanted to increase the resolution, let's say we try and get up to close to 400, then we can press remesh, and then it will remesh at that resolution. Once you want to hide the wire, then just go ahead and select wire again. Okay, great. So now that we've done that, let's create a little bevel within this arch. So let's go back into our scene. I'm going to select the duplicate button again, and I'm going to go to my gizmo and go to a front view and just bring this up. So let's just scale this down slightly, like so. In fact, let's scale it up and see what that looks like. We could also stretch this out slightly, like so. And we don't need it to be that thick, so we could stretch this down just a little bit, and then let's move this down. Okay, like so. Let's do the same thing again. So let's go onto our scene, and then let's duplicate this top one. Do the same thing, move it up, hold the orange icon out the side, and then stretch it. Okay, that looks pretty good. See what it looks like from a top view, see if you need to make any changes. So I'm just going to move this down. Okay, and then when you're happy with that, we can go and merge all of these layers. So I'm just going to select the tick on every single layer, and then I'm going to select voxel merge. And that's going to merge all of these layers together. Now, before we do that, in fact, let's just try and hide some of this mess that's in the background. So if you want this to look consistent from the top to the bottom, then you could either merge all of this, duplicate it, and flip it to the other side and then merge it again, or you could just select one of your other layers. So let's select this one. Let's duplicate this, and then let's just move this down like so. We can then select this middle one here, and then move it down like that. Okay, that looks good. And then same thing again, select the tick, voxel merge, and then that will merge all of your layers. So the bottom section here could do with being dragged out. If it's the wrong size now, then you could always go back to our select mask. Let's go on to select mask, rectangle, and then bring this out. Same thing again, go into the settings, invert, and then on the left hand side go down to your gizmo, or right hand side, and then just stretch this out, and then go back to your select mask, go into settings and clear. And then again, if you go into that wire view, you'll notice that it's stretched those voxels, so we can press voxel as our shortcut. That's revoxeled the model. And then let's go on to trim, rectangle, and then just trim. Okay, maybe just a little bit less than that. Okay, so let's select our wire again so we can see our model. And that's what it looks like so far. It's looking pretty good already. And let's add a little bit more detail here. So I'm going to go onto my flatten brush, and I've got this set all the way down to a radius of 10. And I've also decreased the intensity to around about 8. So here we can just start to scrape on these sides so it looks like it's a worn rock. We don't want it to look so hard surface. And then just scrape on those edges. So you can increase your radius if you want to, and you can increase or decrease the intensity. For now, I'm just going to scrape on all these edges really quickly. And unfortunately, my Apple Pencil is dead. I think I'll be able to switch it on soon. So I'm doing this by hand. It's definitely easier with a pencil. So if you've got the symmetry turned on, then it's going to do the same thing on both sides. You can turn the symmetry off if you want it to look a little bit more unique, so it's a little bit more worn on one side than the other. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then let's go into our trim again, and this time we'll use something like the lasso, and we'll just create some small cuts into the rock. So something like this. That looks pretty good. So I'm just on a side view, and then I can move it into the model, out away from the model, and then just make some small cuts. That's a pretty big cut. Okay, so now let's create some separate parts for this arch. So I'm going to go onto the split, and it's just below trim. So select split, select the rectangle, and then I'm going to split this top section here. So now it's going to split the model into two. you'll notice in the scene we've now got two models, and you can go ahead and rename this if you want. You could select the pencil tool and rename this as top, and then this one could be middle. And let's then go ahead and select the top, and let's hide the middle, and then go back onto that flatten tool and just flatten these edges because they're quite rough now. Now because we have split through this, you'll notice if I go back to wire, we need to revoxel the edge. So press voxel again, and there we go. Now we're gonna have a lot nicer flatten on the edge. And then let's do the same for the middle section. So I'm going to select the eye icon on the top, and then let's just see the middle. Again, revoxel it, and then to use the flatten tool. So let's see what that looks like with all of these layers on. So let's go back into our scene, and there we go. So now there's a clear difference between the two models, whereas before it just looked exactly the same, just as a texture difference when you go between the top and the bottom. Once they're both ticked, then we can see that difference there. And you can just keep going. So let's make a base for this archway. So let's go back into our middle, and let's go to our select mask again. So select mask, and let's select the rectangle tool and select this bottom section here. I'm going to do the same thing again, select our mask and invert it, and then go to our gizmo and pull this down. And this time I'm going to select the outside orange circle, and I'm going to make it just a little bit larger, like so. I could also just stretch this out maybe. Like so. Okay, when you're happy with that, go back to our select. So select mask and then clear. And then I could just go back into that rectangle and maybe just select this bottom section here and just move it back a little bit. So around about there. And then let's invert that mask again. Back into our gizmo. And then stretch it out the other way. Clear that mask. Doesn't look so bad. We could also duplicate all of this. So let's go and merge both these together. So I can voxel merge. And then let's duplicate this layer, go back to our gizmo, let's shrink this one down, and then let's select both of them in the scene and then voxel merge again. Now if you wanted to add any of the details, then we can go into our sculpt. Now notice there's a little bit of distortion here. I might just go back into something like the flatten and just try and flatten this out. Or go back into our voxel. Let's remesh at a higher resolution and remesh that. And you could also subdivide the mesh if you want to add a lot more details. That's going to be quite user intensive, but let's see how this one goes. So we could go back into flatten. You can continue to add any more details that you need to add. So let's just decrease the intensity a little bit, decrease the radius. So you can really start to chip away at those edges. You can go back to the trim on lasso and then just start to add even more chips. And then any of the sculpted details that you wanted to add, so say for example we could go onto the clay brush and then you could begin to add some sort of detail. So let's just try something like this. Let's just add that symmetry back on, make our life a bit easier. And then let's go back to flatten. Could also go on to smooth and just smooth this out. Okay, and then go back to something like clay, or you could use brush as well. It's totally up to you. And you could subtract instead of adding to the model. Now again, this would be easy with the pencil, but I'm using my finger anyway. You know, take your time with it. I'm just rushing through this just to make this tutorial nice and short. But yeah, continue to add loads of detail if you want to. You can go on to subtract. And let's just make this a little bit neater. So let's go back onto that select mask. Let's go onto rectangle. And then let's invert again. So invert. And then I could go onto my gizmo and then just move this down slightly. Ooh, looks like it did a slight side view there. Let's just go back. Let's go back to Gizmo. Make sure I'm just moving it down. Okay, let's go back to select mask, clear the mask. We can go back to flatten and just start to scrape away at those edges. Let's turn that radius down and the intensity. And yeah, just experiment really. Just continue to sculpt away at it, add more details if you want to. Continue adding more masks, so you could mask out that centerpiece again if you wanted to. You could go back into a rectangle and make an even smaller piece on the inside, for example. Invert that mask, go back to the front view or side view, select your gizmo, it's the same technique, and then just bring it up and out. Go back to your select mask and then go to clear. Okay, so yeah, just experiment with it. Let's just go back to that flatten And let's try and flatten those edges a little bit. Right, so let's flip all of this onto its side. So we've only got one layer, so we can just go back to our gizmo, and then let's just flip this around like so, and then I'll just move this one up. And then let's just add some post-processing effects. So right at the top here, looks like a little shutter from a camera. We can select post-processing. I'm going to select full resolution. I'm not going to have the reflection on. I don't really need that on, but I am going to turn on the ambient occlusion. We can already see that's making a big difference there. So let's just turn the strength down a little bit. Let's decrease the size and then maybe increase the curvature bias as well. Now, depth of field, I don't think I'm going to turn that one on. This case, let's turn on bloom, increase intensity just a little bit, maybe just a little bit less on the threshold, so we've got a little bit more bloom on the top and the bottom. Tone mapping, I could increase that a little bit, increase the saturation, maybe decrease the exposure for the background, just so that our model pops out a little bit more. You can go on to color grading if you want to add even more details here. For now, I'm going to turn this one off. Let's turn this curvature on. This could be interesting to make it look a little bit more stylized. And we could change the cavity. So if we want it to glow, then we could do something like this. And then the bump can be a bit darker. Like that. Or of course you can change this to any color you want. Green looks quite cool. Let's turn that curvature back on, and then we can turn on maybe a little bit of chromatic aberration, since it seems to be in every single concept lately. Vignette, if you want a vignette, then you can add that. That doesn't look so bad actually. And we can add grain just to blend in any of those kind of elements together. And we can add sharpen, maybe just a little bit of a sharpen. And then I'll go back into my environment and just test out some different backgrounds. That looks quite cool. We can go into rotation here just to change the light. And I might just change this back to something like an orange. Okay, so that's it. That is how we can model something a little bit more hard surface, and we can model these pillars or an arch or any kind of rocky formation just using these techniques. If you want to hide that grid, we can just go into the display settings here and press grid, and then we can go ahead and render it. So we can go back into our camera here, turn it into perspective, and then we can select our folder. We can scroll all the way down to render, and here I've got the background set to transparent. If you want to keep that background, then you can just untick that. I've set this as 1080, and then I can export PNG. Okay, so there is our archway, and then we can just go ahead and select the export button at the top, and then we could put this into Photoshop or Procreate, where we can continue to paint it into it. Okay, so I hope that helped. I wish I used my pencil in this one, but I haven't got it on me at the moment. So if you like this kind of stuff, if you like more Nomad Sculpt videos, then by all means contact me, put a comment in the comment section and let me know what you think of these kind of videos. All right, I hope that helped, and I will see you in the next video. Take care for now. Bye.